Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 1455 interview series. I'm Sean Murphy. If this is your first time checking us out, welcome. You can learn a lot more about 1455 at 1455litarts.org. And you can check out all the free content we produce, the 1455 interview being one of them. I am joined today. It's almost like a little mini reunion because Whitney was our featured author for March, and she is out in support of her new amazing collection of short stories, Big Bad, which I could not more strongly recommend, especially for those of you that support, I was going to say our endangered species, but maybe the kid brother of novels. Short stories are so vital and awesome. So I have extra reason to advocate for this, but it's also great work. So let me introduce Whitney, and then we'll bring her on. Whitney Collins is the author of the short story collection Big Bad, which is out from Sarabande Books, and it won the 2019 Mary McCarthy Prize in Short Fiction. In addition, she received a 2020 Pushcart Prize, a 2020 Pushcart Prize Special Mention, and won the 2020 American Shorter Fiction Prize. Her fictions appeared or is forthcoming in Agni, Shenandoah, American Short Fiction, Slice, The Pinch, Ninth Letter, and many others. Previously, she was a contributing editor for The Weaklings, which is how she and I first met, amazing magazine that we used to write for, a book reviewer for Barnes & Noble, and an editorial board member for The Big Jewel. Her nonfiction can be found on various sites, including McSweeney's, Salon, Huffington Post. You can find her online at www.whitneycollins.com. Whitney, welcome back. It was great to chat with you last month about Big Bad, and now we're going to take a deeper dive into what makes you tick.
All right. Well, thanks for having me back. I'm glad I got invited back. My cat's on display. As we noticed right before we went live on Zoom, he came in just in perfect time.
And you're going to get like if he's a literary cat, he's going to add, like, when you give an answer he doesn't like, he's just going to have that withering disdain on his face.
Right. That's kind of his. Somebody said he has. Somebody commented yesterday he has the perfect RBF. I'm like, what's that? Resting bitch face. And I didn't know it was already like, had a little monogram to go with it. So.
Well, as I was telling you before we came on, my wife and I are fanboys and fangirls. So she's going to be delighted that he's sharing the screen with us. All right, Whitney, it's awesome to have you here. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say to this stuff. So let's get it on. Let's start at the top. The first book that made you want to be a writer, or a book that changed your life.
Okay, I have it right here. Ramona the Brave by Beverly Cleary. Beverly Cleary just passed away last month at like 104, I think. But this book's incredible. Female heroine. It was irreverent. It was comedic, sensitive. She was the hero of her family and her classroom, but she was always in some sort of trouble. So I don't know, as a girl, it was really great to read this. No princess stuff. I didn't grow up in the age of the Disney princess. I grew up in the age of, Ramona the Brave and, Little House on the Prairie. So kind of these more rugged role models. So that, but also this book, classic 70s book. It's called The Paper Party. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I'm pretty sure it's about drugs. A boy gets invited into the television by a clown who puts down a little red ladder, and then he goes to a paper party inside the TV. And I think I read this book 7,000 times. And I was like, all right, you know what? This just goes to show you can write about your greatest fears, greatest fantasies. So this was where the horror and the fantasy began.
Well, and you know what, Whitney? So that is also, I think, for maybe younger viewers that really don't know. I mean, coming of age in the 70s, you look at the is it the Croft Superstars or whatever, the all of those little shows with the magic flute and the witchy poo. Sigmund, the Simon, there was some drugs going on, and
Something was going on. Yeah.
we that was our normal, which I do think jump started a lot of our imaginations and
I do too.
made us a little more weird and wonderful, I think, in all of the best possible ways.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's equivalent of kind of more recent generations was the Teletubbies, which was just, I found myself watching that and being like, this is good. This is relaxing.
So my wife was a mother at the height of that, so we still call her Vacuum the New.
Right. Get on the
Gotta love that. Okay, thank you for bringing, and also thank you for the visual. Some of the interviewees do that.
Yeah.
I always endorse.
Yeah, so this is where the kind of the regular domestic inspiration, the horror and the fantasy.
Yes, and you know what? I just had like a total. So yeah, R.I.P. and props to Beverly Cleary, a yearling book. I have that such an indelible. Just seeing that on top of the that cover makes me think so fondly of all those books we read back in the day.
And it was pretty groundbreaking back then to write. I mean, granted, it's not super. I mean, it's just about a kid in the neighborhood, but I mean, she was like, I'm going to tell it like it is about little girls. I'm not going to dress them up and doll them up. So
yeah. God bless her. Okay, Whitney, how about your most profound artistic influence?
All right, it's one short story. The Lottery. Okay, so again, totally groundbreaking. 1948, Shirley Jackson writes The Lottery, and it starts out, as I'm sure you're familiar, just this glorious, bucolic setting, idyllic spring day. I think it's spring, maybe summer, early summer. Mm-hmm. And the townspeople gather in the main square. They draw names, and everybody's like, "Ooh, it's a lottery!" And then we find out that the person's name who's drawn is stoned, a public stoning.
Yeah.
And when I read that story in high school, I thought, all right, you can do anything with a short story. And it's a dumbfounding, beautiful, perfectly written short story.
Yeah, I mean, so thank you. I think that's the first time that's come up in this series, which is remarkable, because every writer loves that. I share your enthusiasm. I think that's one of those rare, wonderful works where nothing can replace the first time, right? Because nothing can ever approximate that shock, but it stands up. It was, I think, either it was the anniversary of her death or something, but the New Yorker reprinted, because I think that was where it first appeared. So I recently revisited that, and it holds up spectacularly. To an adult reader that knows exactly what's about to happen, it's still perfection.
It is. And, she received hate, over 300 hate mail letters and, scary stuff. I think she had 6 kids, and she was like, what is going on? And, just great. And I looked this up right before I got on. They actually reference it in a Simpsons episode about trying to win the lottery. So you've made it big time if your short story is mentioned on The Simpsons.
Well, and how many, that's kind of the O. Henry-esque, how many people that influenced in terms of kind of the shock ending and using that form to make political comment without even mentioning politics or, that's another reason it's timeless, I think. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. And I'm also not shocked, having read your work and seeing the ways you've internalized, how to use that strategy in certain ways. Right on. Okay, I'm really excited about this one because I think you and I have very similar sensibilities. How about an album or movie or both that you recommend without reservation?
All right, album, Purple Rain. I know that sounds pretty cliche as an 80s kid, but that album is just perfection. And it's just, Prince was perfection. The album is perfection. And that was, I think, the album that sent Tipper Gore straight to the parental advisory stickers. So you're doing something right. If you got to
Bingo.
And then movie, I mean, again, totally cheeseball. But I wrote for the Weeklings that big, long, epic article about the hero's journey and Top Gun.
Yes.
Okay, so Top Gun, stay with me. As cheesy, corporate capitalist 80s, anti-Russian,
Yep.
guys strutting around and playing volleyball. It truly is that movie. Not necessarily the content of the script, but the structure of that script is perfection. So the way, just the way the plot is managed and held back and brought forward, and just the whole thing, forget all the dialogue, forget what happens if your story follows that. So 2 80s answers from me.
Right on. And probably right around the same time. Remind me, I'll put this in the link when I do the write-up, that we need to link to your Weaklings page, because that's how I first fell in love with you, reading your work at the Weaklings. And just one quick.
That was a fun one to write. Yeah.
Oh God, of course. I think we just passed the 5-year anniversary of Prince's death, so very timely answer on that front too. So yeah, if there's anyone watching this that hasn't explored Purple Rain, like whatever you've heard or you think if you haven't experienced it, you don't know. So check it out. Okay, yeah. How about the best first or last line of any book ever?
All right, well, you're gonna hate me for this because I couldn't pick one.
That's fine. I love you for that.
So to me, Raymond Carver and Joy Williams, I'm staying with the short story themes today.
Yep.
Are the perfect first liner people ever. And what I love about them is, I've read a lot of short stories as like in an editorial manner for literary magazines, and going through the submission piles. And my biggest complaint, and anybody that's ever on staff, the biggest complaint is get to the point. Like, give us the action. Like, don't hold back. This is a short story. What's happening? We don't need a lot of backstory.
That's right.
So I'm going to read a couple of these from Raymond.
Absolutely.
Because they get right to the point, and I love it. Okay. That summer, Wes rented a furnished house north of Eureka from a recovered alcoholic named Chef. Fantastic. I want to read more. Okay. Sandy's husband had been on the sofa ever since he'd been terminated 3 months ago. I mean, like, we're getting the character, what's happened, and like the tension immediately. So I'm going to read a couple more.
Please do.
JP and I are on the front porch at Frank Martin's drying out facility. Okay. Of course, it's Raymond Carver, so everybody's drunk and in the first sentence of everything.
Yeah.
God. Okay, this is great. The woman was called Miss Dent, and earlier that evening, she'd held a gun on a man. So those are some of Raymond's first liners, and then Joy has a couple that I just love, and I'm going to give you my all-time favorite opening sentence here in a second. The yard boy was a spiritual materialist. He lived in the now. Love that. I love this one. The girl is 25. It has not been very long since her divorce, but she cannot remember the man who used to be her husband.
Wow.
And then this is my favorite. Miriam was living with a man named Jack DeWayne, who taught a course in forensic anthropology at the State University. I mean, I love some of these sentences just read like a little miniature story in and of itself. But anytime you can set up like both of the characters, the conflict and the setting in one sentence, it's like, okay, I'm going to read more. Yeah. So that's what I picked.
Now, and I think that's so important, Whitney, to point out like the mastery of economy. And I think, I mean, there's no need. I mean, I've written novels and short stories, so I've got no dog in the fight. But one thing I think is underappreciated about short stories is not, as those of us that write them or love them know, it's not just a shorter form. It requires a whole different strategy. And the one sentence, has been on the couch since he got laid off. You nailed it. That's like a clinic. You're getting both characters, the situation, what's at stake, and it's bam. And you don't have to do that in a novel. It's understood. It's implied that we're going to get to the point. But with a short story, you don't have the time or the reader's attention, especially in 2021.
I love a story, a novel, a song, a movie that starts with the conflict just immediately. And then you can like get us all crazy and then drop back and give us some backstory. But
Yeah.
you know, I hate to read something and be like, I'm 10 pages in and I don't know. I hate to put it down, but I'm not interested.
Yep. Yep. And listen, attention spans are as much of it a premium than they've ever been. So
Right.
it behooves the young writers to master these skills, which is, I think, the reason everyone says you've got to read a lot as well as write a lot.
Right.
And we'll get to that. Speaking of reading and writing, who would you name as an author that's underrated in your opinion, that deserves some more notoriety?
Okay, more visuals.
Thank you.
Julie Hecht, Do the Windows Open. This book has like coffee stains on it. I love it so much. This is literally one of the funniest writers I've ever read in my life. And I think she's only written maybe 3 or 4 books. She doesn't do interviews. She's very reclusive and secretive and keeps to herself. But this collection of stories that are all linked are about a narrator who is taking it upon herself to photograph a world-renowned reproductive surgeon, Walden Pond, the ponds of Nantucket, and all the houses Anne Sexton has ever lived in. And so it's not to mention she's a complete neurotic. So it's all about her trying to get something done that she never gets done. And it's just, I mean, it's one of those books that you have to put down every few pages and just like burst out laughing. I mean, it's really good. So I wish she had written 10 volumes of short stories because they're just really good.
Right on. Well, I am not familiar, so that will be going on my list for sure.
All righty.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yep.
All right. My obligatory self-indulgent question. Why have you not read Moby Dick? Or if you have, is there a classic that you've been meaning to get around to?
I have not read Moby Dick. And when I saw that, I was like, I'm just glad that he assumes that I haven't read it because it's in the category of the fishing, the epic fishing, the Odyssey, the Old Man and the Sea. So I just like to pretend that Moby Dick is just a Led Zeppelin song and not a book.
That's the best possible answer I could ever hope for. Because yes, no shame in your game, and you're invoking Led Zeppelin.
It's too long. I'm going to go on and just say I feel like I know what it's going to be about, which is really bad. But I feel like it's going to be like the Bridget Jones Diary of like cranky old like Bostonian fishermen.
Fair enough. Which is not unlike a John Bonham 20-minute drum solo. Why read the book when you can listen to the song?
Right. I've heard the song, and if it's affiliated, it's kind of repetitive. So,
That's a mic drop moment, Whitney. That your work here is done.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's turn the attention back to you. Okay. Would you say there's a single theme or issue that your work does or seeks to address?
Okay, well, I thought about this, and I'm like, what am I doing or trying to do in most every story that I'm writing? And I realized that I have one character that is completely unafraid of the truth, is the kind of person that's running straight into the fire, versus a character that's living in complete denial and trying, what fire? What are we talking about?
Yeah.
So that's happening in almost every story, is kind of it's not good versus evil. It's like delusion versus truth.
Yes. And yes, having read and loved Big Bad, for whatever it's worth, I concur. I think that's a really succinct way to sum up kind of your approach and style through those stories.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. And again, for those of you that are listening, you got to check out the story.
I think that's what I'm doing. I mean, it's kind of hard to evaluate your own work, but I'm like, I think that's what's happening, is kind of like, I'm going to pretend it's not happening. And, the truth is painful. So if you inject truth into your stories, they're immediately going to be like edgy, which is weird.
Right.
To think that just truth makes it edgy, but it does.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I always conflate the next two questions because there are certain themes that have emerged. So thinking about writing routines and writer's block, do you have opinions? Do you have experience? Do you have thoughts? Yay, nay?
I mean, this is kind of a cheesy comparison, but I really do feel like, I mean, writer's block to me, I don't know if that's, I think it does exist, but I call it writer's dread. Like sometimes I just wake up and it's the same as like, I really know I should go for a run, or I really know I should, it's in the same category as exercise and chores that you put off.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to write if you quit writing the day before and you've finished on a paragraph that you felt really excited about. And you're like, I can't wait to go back and kind of continue on.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's just dread and procrastination. And it's not so much a creative block as it is a resistance to work.
Yes. And I think the only real comparison you can make to writing and working out is that you hate to do it and you feel really good once you've done it. No one has ever, I don't think anyone's ever written and said, I wish I hadn't done that, even if it's not going well. Probably no one's ever worked out and said, I wish I could take that back. It's once you get through it.
Right. And especially, and I am not a runner, but I run, and I am the slowest runner in the world. I mean, I think when the people see me running, they're like, what is she limping? Like, what's happening? It's very slow. But I always say that the first part of running is the hardest. It's like that first half mile, that first almost mile. You're like, and same with writing. It's like, God, just getting in the momentum is the hard part.
Yep. Yep. Right on. I hear you on the not being a runner. In fact, I'll say I'm not a writer, but I write. How's that for?
Yeah, there you go.
It's just repeated habit. Okay.
Right.
How about a setback, artistic or otherwise, that when you look back on it, may have actually put you on a different or trajectory that you now find yourself on?
Well, I'm gonna just say motherhood. Yeah, yeah. It's so all consuming in terms of time and energy
Mhm.
that but ironically, and I've heard other moms and other dads say this as well, it's that there is this unexpected boost of creativity that you get from it for whatever reason, either because you're so inundated with the boringness of
Yeah.
diapers and feeding and whatever, that there is a boost of creative inspiration that tends to come around parenting, but it just, there's not a whole lot left over. So that was kind of a big gap for me. And the minute Mark, my youngest, went to kindergarten, that's when I went to Spalding to get my graduate degree. And it was just kind of like, I didn't realize how much I'd been chomping at the bit, but that was it. The other thing that I really think is kind of like this lag time for a lot of people, and not just in the writing world, but maybe just in life and creative world, is just middle age. And it's like, I think a lot of artists are successful in their younger years because they're willing to feel their pain. But I think that as you get older, you kind of start to excavate it. Like you start to kind of figure out who you are and where it all comes from. And I think that your work can be deeper later in life, but there's kind of this valley at some point.
So A, I love that answer. And B, yeah, I would suggest, generally speaking, one of the things that I can't stand, especially as I get older, is you can just tell right away. And I won't denigrate MFA, or I don't subscribe to the cliche of MFA fiction, but there is a certain type of, shall we call, MFA fiction or young writer fiction where it's a lot of navel gazing and a lot of what they think they should be doing. And when you have a more mature writer, whether it's through parenthood or just having some lived experience, I think that builds in an empathy and an ability to kind of relate something that people can relate to.
Right.
So,
Yeah, you have to kind of slog through some stuff to kind of
yeah,
get from like the kind of the raw creativity of like your youth to kind of the more like substantial. So
Yeah,
anyway,
and listen, I'll happily give another kind of blurb to Big Bad, which is there's a very kind of
are you there?
yep.
Did you freeze on me?
I might have. You didn't freeze on me, so that's weird. Can
Are
you
you
hear me?
there?
I am.
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. Phew. You didn't freeze on me, so that's weird. Okay, good. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad I'm
Okay.
back. No, I was in the middle of saying that Big Bad, among many other accolades I would give, is that it does have this kind of gentle wisdom, that infuses the stories. Like, I'm not saying that a younger person couldn't write that, but there's a certain authority that's conveyed, the stakes and the way that the dilemmas are kind of laid out. So, yay, middle-aged writers.
Yeah, that's right. Yay, middle-aged anything.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so we're talking about career kind of. How would you say you've developed your career? What has your trajectory been?
Well, it's interesting. So I started out really early on, and I went to a grad program. I think we spoke about this the last time, in Chicago in like 1997. I was only 2 years out of college, and I was like, I have nothing to write about. So I kind of put fiction aside for, 19 years, and jumped into the world of nonfiction journalism, book reviews, that kind of stuff. And I think that was good. But when I did my re-entry back into the world of fiction, I just was like, you know what? I have to make up for lost time. So my approach has been to write as much as I can and to accrue as many rejections as I can. I think that people go into it saying, how many things can I get published? And I think that a better thing to do is, it's a numbers game. So take your stories, and if you are submitting your story to 4 literary magazines, you should probably be submitting it to 40. So I think a good goal is 2 rejections a week.
So one of the things I did that I think, again, a younger, kind of more savvy individual will shake their head and say, "Duh!" But for years, I did all my kind of bookkeeping on like a legal pad, and when I put that into a spreadsheet, it made it somehow easier for me to submit more often, and B, it just becomes part of the routine. You get a rejection, you move it from this column to that column. It really depersonalizes. It does kind of become this hustle of to keep the train moving.
That's right. That's right. I keep saying it's a three-part process. You read the good stuff that you'd like to write, you write, and then you submit, and you just keep, it's like lather, rinse, repeat.
Yeah, and we were talking. Yeah, we were talking before we came on a little bit about kind of the literary life, but another thing that most of us know, but it's refreshing to me. The more writers I've been talking to, it's not refreshing because I think we all want we want everyone to succeed. We want everyone to move copies and make money. That's just goodwill. Right. But where I'm going with this is the more people I've talked to, the more I'm realizing, even people that are at a certain level that I would consider, wow, I would love to aspire to have that track record. It's still ceaseless rejection. The industry is just
it's
no
set
matter.
up to, yeah, it really is.
And so the reason I bring that up for those of you watching is not to be a downer. It's actually, I think it's inspiring. It's a reminder that there's no guarantee, and that no matter what your track record, individual editors have individual needs, and it just might not be a fit there. It might be a perfect fit somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And I've had occasion to repeat this. It's becoming a little bit of a mantra because I've heard more people talk about it. But if an editor ever writes you back and says, "We'd love to see more work," they mean it.
Right.
So never take that lightly. Rejections can suck, but there are different types of rejections.
There are. And I have like a spreadsheet where it gets a green if it's accepted. The greens are very rare. It gets a yellow if I withdraw it from somewhere, which is also very rare because that means it's been accepted elsewhere. But the rest of the spreadsheet is pink, which is a pink highlighter. That's a rejection. But I do have a blue highlighter for the nice rejection, because it needs to be noted, and it doesn't need to be clumped in there with all the other generic form knows.
Yep. Yep. Right on.
It's a good
Okay.
thing.
So here's an easy one. When you define or explain what literary success means to you?
Okay. So I had to think about this, but when someone says, I read your story and I laughed out loud, or I read your story and I actually cried. Those, to me, that's hard. That's hard to elicit in me when I read. So when I actually have like an audible laugh or like an actual tear, like I'll just give me one tear, you know, that to me is okay. Well, my words are doing something there.
Yeah. And I'm curious, how have you found, in circa 2021, when you get feedback like that, are you getting emails from strangers, or is this at readings, a little bit of both?
Um, Sometimes I do get an email from a random reader that says, I just read blank story, and they'll actually name the story. And I mean, there's just nothing greater. It's like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. And I always write back and I'm like, I'm just a normal person sitting at home thinking nobody's reading. So when you actually email me, it's exciting. So that doesn't happen a lot, but I occasionally will get a specific story named with a specific reaction.
Yeah, so that's great to hear, and the reason that's also become a little bit of a mantra that I've found myself repeating, which is I want to encourage people to take the 5 seconds to, if you read something, nonfiction, fiction, whatever, that moves you, a poem, that can really make an author's year, day,
Yeah.
week. And Whitney and I were talking a little bit before we came live. Um, Again, in all sincerity, like no sarcasm, like we all want each other to succeed. And nothing would make me happier than a writer I admire to just crush it. But realistically, that's not going to happen for many of us. So to be able to connect meaningfully, especially with a stranger, to me, I think really validates, it gets at it, in a non-pretentious way, it gets at what art's all about. It's a
It
way to
does.
communicate, it's a way to break down barriers, and even if it's for a fleeting moment, connect with another human being you wouldn't have otherwise connected with. And there's something so beautiful and real about that.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah,
And
and I'm
social
lucky.
media has made that so much easier. Like
Yes.
sometimes I'll get like a random like and a comment, or, just even that little stuff. I mean, it's made me realize I should be doing that to every poem or story or video that moves me. I should be commenting and letting them know.
That's been I have been that guy, you know, for a while, but I've tried to up my game, especially during COVID year. I will just drop a email or social media, and I make it a point. There's no ROI. It's a straight up, message of appreciation, and then usually a dialogue will ensue. But
Right.
if I never hear back from the writer, that's fine. I hope they got the message, but
Right.
the whole point is to just say, hey, thank you. And
Yeah.
again, I mean, and I think I don't assume there's a ton of people out there watching these, but if you are watching this and you think, that's not why I want to be a writer, listen, that would be wonderful if you achieve higher things. But if this sounds like, that doesn't sound so sexy, like you might not be in the right field, because that's the
Right.
deal. Most of the writers I talk to, in fact, I would say without exception, Whitney, I've asked that question at this point, maybe to 60 people, and I don't think anyone has talked about sales or money. And I don't think it's because
Yeah.
they're being modest. It's, yeah, all those things are great, but the real reason that we do this is for the stuff you talked about.
Right. It's just to affect, to move people,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Okay. Is there something that you wish you had known as an artist 10 or even 20 years ago?
This goes back to the age and time and life, is just that, time is an illusion. We feel so rushed in our 20s and 30s to like make a big, I don't know, entrance into whatever field that you're interested in. You feel like I've got to, get my foot in the door. Oh my gosh, I'm 32. My foot's not in the door. So I think I just would have like exhaled and not felt as frantic sometimes about how much I was producing, and was I ever going to get a story published? And I think that it's important to remember, if you are an artist and you are called to do that, there will be an opportunity that comes your way in the right time. I mean, I know that sounds really corny and whatever, but it really, time can be a real enemy to the artistic community.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree, and I think it's especially bad in America. I think we fetishize youth that has like almost a kind of a rock and roll movie star, and very, like we said, very few writers, even the lucky ones, are of that ilk. So to me, it always comes back to a even more simple yet profound. If you're not enjoying the ride, and that also can sound corny, but genuinely, like
Yeah.
if the writing isn't satisfying you on some level, um, wow, I can't imagine putting that kind of time and effort into something if there wasn't at least an enjoyment. And for me, for long fallow periods, that's what sustained, the rejection and the
Right.
purity. This notion of, well, I feel better having done the work, and I didn't do it necessarily to become famous. I did it, because I kind of had to.
Right.
So yeah, I always feel, I never feel smug, but I always feel good knowing that that baseline has been consistent for me, going back to when I was, and you put it so perfectly earlier, this notion of, because it's hard to articulate, but you're young and you're full of energy, but you're not really sure what to write about, or if you have anything to write about. You've got big feelings, but you might not have big ability. And at some point, with a lot of work,
Yes.
those things start to come together.
Oh, I agree.
Well, you've dropped a lot of knowledge, Whitney. How about a 1 minute exhortation for a beginning writer that's looking for advice?
Um, okay. So I don't necessarily have like a set routine that I follow every day, but I mentioned this in our original interview. I really think that if you set your goals small and achievable, I'm going to write a page a day and I'm going to read an excellent short story a day. Then at the end of the month, ideally, you would have 30 pages and you would have read 30 fantastic short stories. And I always find that those two things are achievable and they will do wonders for your, I don't know, your portfolio, your production level. The other thing that I mentioned earlier too is I think you, as artists, all of us are pretty sensitive, empathetic people. We're big feelers, and I think that makes good art. But like I said, I think at some point you have to go past feeling the emotion and feeling the pain to really excavating it. And I think that's where you get your depth of characters and plot. So that's another advice. And then I also mentioned this in the first interview a little bit, was make a list of the things that you kind of feel like you're an authority on. Tough things. Maybe you can't write a book about what it's like to be from a war-torn country, or from, maybe, I think we listed off some of these things before. About being bullied, or coming from a family that's been torn apart by addiction or poverty, or, make your list of what and dig deep into those subjects, because I think those are the most real stories you're going to have, come out.
Yeah.
There's going to be some heart in them.
Yeah. Well, real truth, heart, your work is, and also, I don't know if we put enough of a point on this. Again, when I first fell in love with your writing via the Weaklings, God, you're a funny writer, and laugh for laugh, in terms of contemporary writers that I've admired, you've probably got more guffaws out of me than any other writer that jumps to mind. So yet another reason to recommend both Whitney's book, Big Bad, but her nonfiction, because it's got a lot of heart, but it's funny as hell too.
Thank you.
So, well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I think you've got so much, affirming and inspiring things to say for writers. So I hope people pay attention and learn accordingly. But I'm also delighted to say that we'll look forward to connecting for this summer's festival. And those of you out there that are on the verge of becoming big fans, you'll get another taste of Whitney in July. So stay tuned for more information there. But in the meantime, thank you for the book.
Thank you. Sorry,
Thank
I glitched out there for a little bit. You'll have to delete that.
I think it was the cat. How dare we not, this is all a delivery device to introduce your baby.
I should bring him over.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's get him over here. Rocky. Oh, I mean, look at this thing. He's really you can tell he's really neurotic.
Oh my, look at that face. That is the greatest.
All right. Yeah,
We'll get him involved in Lit Fest too.
Okay.
Somehow we'll find a way. All right, Whitney, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for dropping some knowledge on us.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you later.